Well, wherever you are joining the conversation tonight, thank you very much for connecting. Another Friday is here, and yet another thorny discussion is on the chopping board on Ghana Connect. Tonight, it's all about President Akufo-Addo, who on Wednesday met civil society groups in the governance and anti-corruption space. They came under the umbrella of the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition. Now, President Akufo-Addo at that meeting gave a verdict. It was his verdict on the work of civil society groupings in Ghana. Here is some of what he had to say.
Civil society organizations that mounted campaigns to make sure that I did not continue to sit in this seat. I cannot overlook that these were not people who were in any way either objective or sympathetic to what I was doing.
Complicit, unsympathetic, and not objective. Well, that was the take of Mr. President. That got us thinking about what exactly the role of civil society groupings is. That's why we tabled the question tonight. What do you expect of civil society organizations in Ghana? And do you think they have lived up to expectation? Tonight, Ghanaians home and abroad connect to assess the role of civil society groups in our democratic dispensation. We connect on Ghana Connect right after this break.
Allianz, insurance since 1890. At Allianz Life Ghana, we have a wide range of life insurance packages to suit all pockets, from individuals, groups, associations, and businesses. We cover your employees, your funerals, pensions, children's education, and your future. Call us on 0302-267-892 or visit our website www.allianz-gh.com for more inquiries. Allianz Life, we secure your future.
Wow, wow, wow. Hope you have heard, rent to own now in Ghana. The Flan City Extension Project Rent to Own Land and House Ownership Scheme by the Ningo Prampram District Assembly and its partners, supported by the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development and the UN Habitat, are right here in Ghana. So be smart, because where you trade and live really matters. Apply now and own a home or a fully serviced land. Wait a minute, don't forget to join our affiliate housing cooperatives also. Special offers last up to October 31st, 2021. Call us on 055 55 3300 or 0577 911101 and 055 70 54 635. Website newaccra.city. Plant City Extension Projects, shaping Ghana's urban future.
You're live on Ghana Connect with me, Benjamin Akakpo. Now, President Akufo-Addo on Wednesday took a swipe at governance and anti-corruption civil society organizations. He described some of them as politically tainted and unsympathetic to his work. In fact, he says some of them even campaigned to get him out of office. Let's listen to what exactly Mr. President had to say as we get into the nitty-gritty.
Allegations that are made against public officials. The bare allegation in itself does not raise, in my view, a presumption of irregularity or improper conduct. You have to listen to the person against whom the allegation is made and see whether they have an explanation that on the face of it makes sense or justifies their conduct, and then the investigation into it. So I'm not shirked in any way my commitment that we should try and develop a state whose agencies act not in the personal interest of those who man them at any given time, but in the interests of those to whom they serve. I've not retreated in any way from that. But I think also there is something that none of us can overlook: the highly politicized atmosphere in which many of these allegations are raised in Ghana, in which some of the civil society organizations are privy to and complicit in, where it's the line between them being independent commentary and being politically related commentary is very, very thin. And in many, many cases, there are lines that are in fact crossed. There are civil society organizations that mounted campaigns to make sure that I did not continue to sit in this seat. I cannot overlook that when I hear them continuing to attack my government and its works, that these were not people who were in any way either objective or sympathetic to what I was doing. So if I tend not to pay too much attention to what they say, I don't know. For myself, I think that a lot of objective people would appreciate the position that I take. But nevertheless, as I say, when you are in this seat, you're required to listen to everybody, especially to people like you, to take into account the statements that and the commentary that you make, and then we'll move forward from it. I think that the thing that we all have to be thankful about in Ghana is that we now have an atmosphere where this kind of discourse can take place without the fear of the midnight knock, because it has not always been like that in our history. Some of us grew up at a time when anything which
Well, that was His Excellency the President sharing his thoughts as he interacted with some civil society organizations. So we thought it was about time we had a conversation on CSOs, pressure groups, and think tanks. What are they? What should they do? And have they met your expectations as, an ordinary Ghanaian? Connecting with us tonight via Zoom for this conversation are Dr. Alidu Seidu. He's a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana. We also have George Poku, an accountant and radio show host in Georgia in the United States of America. We have Abena Echa, a final year law student at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Also joining the conversation, Benjamin Dowuna is a public relations practitioner and a writer. And we have Afiba Harrison, a youth activist and former student activist. For those of you who are joining us right before we connect with our guests, you can connect with us via WhatsApp on 055 1111997. It's as simple as that. 055 1111997. Let me at this juncture connect with our guests, and let me just say hello to each one of you to know that you are joining us via Zoom. Dr. Seidu, George Poku, Abena Echa, Mr. Dowuna, and Afiba Harrison. Thank you for joining the conversation. So let's just connect. Let's just make sure that all of you can hear me and I can hear you in return, so we kickstart this conversation. Dr. Seidu, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Great to have you. George Poku, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you.
Good, great. Abna, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm on the call.
And then Mr. Dowuna, are you also there? Mr. Dowuna, are you with us? Can we check on Afiba as well? Afiba, are you with us? All right, so we shall start with Dr. Seidu, Alidu Seidu. Now, you lecture political science at the University of Ghana, and you followed this entire, situation with the CSOs taking on, His Excellency the President and his party. And what he said in recent times, saying that some of them may not be objective enough because they might have toed certain political lines or even campaigned against him. What is your reaction to the president's comments?
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening to you and then to your listeners. I think the president is coming from one particular perspective of the general understanding of the work of civil society and their historical evolution. If you go back to the literature, broadly speaking, civil society is theoretically conceptualized in two forms. You have what we call the Tocqueville's liberalist understanding of civil society as that group of people that are neither part of the state nor part of the family that work in collaboration with the state to be able to achieve the betterment of the lives of the people and unburden some of the day-to-day policy making, decision making processes of the state. So in a liberalist understanding of civil society and their work, they are supposed to work in tandem with the state so that the state doesn't just assume that it has the monopoly to decide, to participate, and to make decisions alone, but it can benefit from the support and then the intellectual thought of the civic group. That is one. So if you look at it from that perspective, you will assume that, broadly speaking, civil society should work in tandem with government or the state to be able to achieve development. But if you look at the Gramscian perspective, that is largely post-Marxist, they see civil society organizations as largely mobilizing to put pressure and to antagonize in a more respectful, evidence-based manner the day-to-day workings of what? The state. So if you read extremely, people even say the post-Marxists think of the state as largely predatory and the civic groups as largely what? Harmless. So you need to be able to stand on your feet as a harmless, defenseless citizen or civic organizations and put pressure on the ever-powerful predatory tendencies of the state. So in this sense, civil society acts as a kind of countervailing force and countervailing force to the powers of the state, the dominant powers of the state. So when you look at civil society from this perspective, it may be very different from the way the president is conceptualizing it. So depending on the political ideology that you affiliate with and the ever-riding syndrome of the works of civil society, you begin to see that most of these two extreme theorizations are currently merging, where civil society organizations can work on one hand to complement, to support government and the state to be able to get to realize the full potential of providing development for the people. But at the same time, they can criticize, they can antagonize, they can challenge the authority and the powers of the state, where they believe that the state is not doing the right thing.
Okay, hold your horses.
Speaking,
just hold your horses right there for me. And I'll be passing this question round to other guests who are connecting with us. But just because you touched on that bit about antagonizing, the powers that be or any sitting government. So is that to say, right before I move on to the others, that if these civil society organizations get antagonistic towards government, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that? Because we heard Mr. President say that some of them even acted in ways that would have impeded, his presidency in this particular term. So is that to say that there is absolutely nothing wrong with civil society organizations that feel, well, you are not doing the right thing and we're even going to campaign against you? In other words, get antagonistic against government.
So I think if it is evidence-based or the antagonism is evidence-induced, to suggest that what government is doing is not right, I think they are on the right path to do that, as long as it is within the remit of the law. So you wouldn't say because government is not doing the right thing, you are going to take arms and overthrow government. That would be moving out of what? The constitutional permission of their work. But as long as they have evidence to show that government is not actually living up to its expectation per the constitution, or government is not following the constitution and the policy, and the institutions of the state, I think within the remit of the law, they can resist and put government backward to order.
Okay, my final bit on that very point then. Was it then in bad taste what Mr. President said that, some of these organizations campaign against him, and maybe even he might take what they say with a grain of salt?
Sorry, my line went off. Can you repeat the question again?
Okay, so I was saying, based on what you've just said, and what Mr. President said in recent times concerning some of these civil society organizations, which may have even fomented displeasure of the people against him and even campaigned against him, is that to say that maybe the choice of words of Mr. President were in bad taste? Dr. Seidu, did you get the question? Well, it appears we're struggling with Dr. Seidu's connection. But wherever you are connecting with us tonight, we're talking about the CSOs and their engagement with Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana, and some of the feedback from Mr. President. Are the CSOs living up to expectation as far as you are concerned? Share with us on WhatsApp 055 1111997. Let me come to Mr. Poku now. You have also followed this matter keenly, looking at the sort of engagement that transpired between the CSOs and Mr. President, and especially some of the things that Mr. President said, in respect of the CSOs. What is your initial reaction?
My initial reaction is the choice of words and the way the president interacted with them was a little bit below the belt. Because at the end of the day, if we are going to be fair, just as Doc was talking about, some of these CSOs, I mean, there are different levels of CSOs. There are those that are for growth and development in the rural areas. There are those that are for making the government accountable. And so if such a group is doing what it is established to do within your administration, and you use those kind of words, that is where my problem lies. Because at the end of the day, during the time that he was campaigning before he became president, and the same kind of groups like Let My Vote Count, Occupy Ghana, all of these ones were pushing his agenda, he never saw anything wrong with it. He never thought it was bad or anything. So now that the shoe is on the other foot, all of a sudden, you see their antagonism and their way of trying to put pressure on you as a government to do the right thing as being wrong. Then you are speaking from both sides of your mouth. Because what is good for the goose is good for the gander.
What specifically?
Pardon?
What specifically did Mr. President say that you found to be, hypocritical, so to speak?
Now, the fact that he's saying that some of these groups even campaigned against him or tried to open the populace's eye to some of the things that are wrong, that is not being fixed, which is, in a sense, they campaigning against him. Because again, if you had done right by everybody by doing what is you are supposed to have done, these groups would not have gone ahead to try to educate the populace about what you have not done. And that's making you unpopular or making you think they are campaigning against you. They are sticking to what they were set up to do, which is they are trying to educate and help hold government accountable for whatever that they said they are doing. Because again, it's easy for you to make promises. It's easy for you to say things when you are campaigning. And if there is nobody to balance you out in a way to say that, hey, you said you were going to do A, B, C, and D, and you are not doing it, and things are not going right, then we are not going to be able to go anywhere.
Right. Let me connect now with Abana. Now, we've taken one side of the discussion, the discourse, as we've spoken about what Mr. President said that was supposedly in bad taste, at least per some of you. But what do you think? Because on the other hand, Mr. President also said that he would continue to listen to divergent views. That is a very important point, that he would continue to listen to divergent views, including those of some of these CSOs who have, spoken against him. He also says he has not shirked his commitment to develop a state whose agencies act in the interest of the people. He, of course, makes mention of the fact that we are in a very highly political atmosphere, but that he is going to continue. His commitment to the process remains. Does that not suffice? All these condemnations that are coming through, where does that sit with you?
I think that ultimately the activities of these civil societies should remain neutral, not neutral in the sense that there is some level of fear to actively call out government when it's going wrong, but there should be the thin line drawn by these organizations to not side with a particular political party in their attempts to call out bad governance. I think for me, in that event, they lose their popularity and legitimacy to serve as a unifying force in terms of the entire population, representing the interests of the majority. To that extent, in the event where they are not actively putting out their campaign or actively advocating in the manner that shows that it is in line with a particular political party's ideology, but rather it's towards the common good of Ghanaians. For me, I think that activity is one that should continue. However, looking at the political status of the president, it's also very tricky when you make such statements, which in some sense can be read to be very opposite, in the sense that in one breath, you call them out for calling bad governance, and then in the other breath, you commend them and say, no, I'm ready to listen to you. I think that very political play there is one that was not so successful. So I think that it's plausible that he goes ahead to tell them that it's important for them to continuously put out the good work in representing individuals' views and in representing the interest of most and representing the interests of Ghanaians. But then that statement should not be one that should be construed as an active hamper on their activities. I think that when we view it in the light of it's being hampering their activities, we don't serve the political interest of fostering our democracy.
Tell me, Abna, now, you're a student of the law and you know what our Constitution says about such groupings and all of that. You speak about neutrality. Do you feel that is possible for all of these, CSOs to toe that very fine line in the middle? We've had so many of them in this country, and when you go back just about to last year, you would see those who banded up, hundreds of them speaking against what the president had done in asking the Auditor General to proceed on leave, for example. How do you expect them to toe that line of neutrality? And do you feel if they don't toe it, then it makes them any less of what they are or what they are doing?
I think two things comes to mind. Firstly, I think that it's quite possible for that to happen, especially I agree with the panelists who mentioned that most of their reports can't be evidence-based. In that sense, you appeal to people's objectivity. So individuals see the trajectory of the government, they're able to weigh it across various governments, various countries, etc. That can allow them to, maintain that objective stance and appeal to individuals without invoking a sense of politicization. But I think in the event where there is active politicization, it does not really detract from their work, even though I personally admire the former. I think it does not detract because the existence of CSOs exists on a broad spectrum where we have political parties from one end, having people like CSOs that actively campaign in their favor, and we have people on the other end who also actively campaign in that area. So even if there tends to be that politicization, I think that spectrum balances it out and allows for individuals to still make informed decisions and opinions.
Whether you're here in Ghana or abroad,
can I disagree with her, please?
Who is speaking, please? Who is speaking?
Dr. Alidu.
Dr. Alidu. Sure, a quick point. One there.
Yeah. So my sister's point is very well made. But even in academic literature, civil society organizations are not supposed to be neutral. They can take a partisan position, and even if you read the works of Kofi Dwa, you read the work of Ninsane, Bratton, and all those things, they talk about what we call the pro-democratic civil society. The civil societies that are purely for championing the interests and the collective good of the people. And those that are alternative, the alternative civil society, and that are sponsored, created, and influenced by governments of the day to do their bidding, to serve their political interests. And in the literature, we have what we call GONGO, governmental organized non-governmental organizations that are created, sponsored, and funded by governments to sponsor and speak for their political interests within the context of the country and even outside the country. So this is widely studied in democratic politics, but also in international relations. So they are not supposed to be neutral, but they are supposed to work with evidence that can appeal to the rational human being to understand that the politics or the policies that they are advocating for are not what is evidence-based and for the collective good, and not just targeting government for no apparent reason. So in the literature, they can be politically affiliated.
Thank you for that interjection, Dr. Saidu. Let's do a quick one with Benjamin Dowona and Afiba as well. Ben, have you joined the conversation now? Do we have Benjamin Dowona? How about Afiba? Is Afiba with us? All right.
Yeah.
Good. Afiba, so I'm sure you've paid attention to the conversation so far, what each of those speakers have shared up to this point. What is your quick take? These CSOs, some of them have been accused of not being objective enough, not being neutral. We just heard Dr. Alidu, allude to the fact that they don't necessarily have to be neutral in the first place. But on the back of what Mr. President said, do you feel he goofed a bit? Was it a gaffe, some of what he said about these civil society organizations going after him? After all, isn't that what we're supposed to expect?
So quickly, Evans, I first of all think that we shouldn't, if I should say, exaggerate what the comment of the president on some CSOs being politically aligned, and which in itself is more or less inevitable, because at any point in time, you would have an organization making a stance, presenting a political opinion in terms of policy, in terms of their ideology. And that's why I agree with the professor when he said that CSOs, even though on literature, should be politically aligned, but even in practice, it is impossible not to be politically aligned, because at any point in time, like I've already said, you might be aligning with a particular way of thinking, a particular policy, whatever it might be, you would be aligning. The problem is when that particular decision in itself seems to be against party A or party B. And that's why comments from the president, such as political parties or CSOs rather, being antagonizing or sort of trying to rise against his government is something we are hearing today, and it's expected. But the truth is, you cannot take that out completely. You cannot eliminate such stances, even on the part of CSOs. It's just not possible, because we are all political beings. And these platforms are one of the largest collective representation of what people think should be done other than what is happening. So I feel we shouldn't even, unless we think that being political is problematic. And I would believe that assumption will be coming from the reflection of our political landscape or political life, what we think being political means. You understand? So
right.
People would, in terms of their understanding of what being political means, would be to say that people are taking advantage of systems to, pursue their own interests. But if we are looking at political leanings and the understanding of being political in itself as seeking the general good of people, like taking a stance that in itself benefit all, then we shouldn't have a problem with CSOs being political. So I think the problem is coming from our understanding, which is a reflection of our political life, and the assumption that being political in itself is bad.
Afiba, I totally get your point here, but isn't it a slippery slope? Because you're saying one thing, which indeed would mean that CSOs don't necessarily have to be apolitical, that they can in fact be political, yet seek the national interest or the national good. But on the other hand, we have a very zero-sum game when it comes to our politics in this country. You are either for or against. And if you adopt a posturing that is against the system at any particular time, even though you may not be treading a political path, in your mind, it is considered that you are being political. How do we marry the two?
So exactly my point, Evans.
This is Benjamin, actually.
at a particular, yes. But then it's the same thing. I think the where we can draw the line is what exactly that political pursuit is intended for. So when that pursuit or that stance in itself is self-seeking, only serve a few, then we could look at it as being bad politicking. And that's why we can even, like on a general front, call out these CSOs and say, what you're doing doesn't serve our good. But if a particular call, either for or against a governmental policy or any ideology or any way of behavior, is being either supported or otherwise, then we cannot say that politics in itself is bad and not for the people. So I'm more interested in the intent behind the politics CSOs stand for or are not supporting. Okay. So if it's for the general good of all, that is something that should be encouraged. But the problem, like you rightly said, the idea of what being politicized or of an idea or a policy means to us as Ghanaians in itself is where a larger part of today's conversational problem is coming from.
Okay, and I suppose many people might even be debating what the national good is or what the general good is. But wherever you are, you can join the conversation as well. Don't be left out. The number on WhatsApp is 055 1111997 055 quadruple 1. That is 1111997. Join us and let us know what you think about the president's comments, what the CSOs have been doing, and whether they are playing the role as CSOs that you expect as a citizen of this country, home or abroad. Let me come to Dr. Seidu now. A lot of talk has been, brought to bear when it comes to CSOs not being political or being political yet serving the national interest. Where do we draw the line? Is it not rather difficult to, peg these CSOs in one corner and say they must be apolitical, but if they will be political, they must still play their roles in a certain context? How difficult is it to, draw that line?
So if you go back to the historical evolution of these groups, largely, especially in Africa, our democratic transition, I think the third wave of democratization actually created a lot of weak states. Immediately after independence, state capacities were relatively poor. There were people with little expertise to be able to power the bureaucracy system and a whole lot of other things. So the weak states at that particular point in time benefited largely from what? Very strong civil society groups. So where you tend to have a very weak state, very strong civil society organizations are able to bring the work of collective interest to bear. But where you have a very strong state and a very strong civil society, there is bound to be that element of clash. So when this happens, governments in their own wisdom may create civil society organizations that are able to what? Compete and antagonize and fight genuine civil society organizations on behalf of government. Because when government seems to be fighting civil society, people will say that government is trying to shrink the civic space and not allowing civil society organizations to work. And that is a serious infringement to democracy. So what government usually do is that they create alternative civil society organizations, empower them, fund them, so that the war is now between these government-sponsored or affiliated civil society organizations against the genuine civil society organizations. So,
and we've seen a number of them. We've seen a number of these sponsored ones in the system.
A lot of them, and they compete with the genuine ones for policy space and for even sometimes research. So what usually happens is that at the end of the day, because we have a very strong state and a very strong civil society, and government don't want to be seen to be shrinking the space, the civic space that is created for civil society organizations as part of what? The democratic processes. They create these alternative civil society groups to compete with them and to do the bidding of government. So what the ordinary Ghanaian will have to be very discerning, will have to be able to research and know the source of funding and the affiliation of these groups. But at the end of the day, what I will usually advocate for is looking for the evidence. If whether it is a government-sponsored or affiliated civil society group or a genuine civil society group. Because mind you, some of these genuine civil societies are not properly genuine. In the literature, they talk about what we call uncivil civil societies. That is civil societies that pretend to be doing the work of civil society when in actual fact they are not doing. So they started as a genuine ones, but in the processes of transformation, they become uncivil. They abandon the civil cause that they were actually fighting for, and has typically become what? An appendage of governments of the day successively. So what we need to do moving forward is not to assume that once a civil society is started as a genuine one,
right,
there is a tendency that's going to continue genuinely. It can become uncivil in the process. So we need to look at the level of evidence, the level of logic and reasoning that comes to the issue of what? Debate and all the things that they talk about. When they are actually advocating for policy, what evidence do they use? Is it research informed? Is it evidence based? What is the source of evidence? And how does that help collectively to move this country forward? So we should be able to look at their procedure, methods of working, methodology, and then the evidence that they adduce in trying to influence policy. That will make us be able to tell the difference between these two.
In other words, as a political scientist, I would be expecting that you are thinking along the lines of empirical evidence, statistical evidence to back some of the things that these civil society organizations would be putting out there. But you see, on the back of what you have just made mention of the sources of funding, for example, when it comes to political parties themselves, we have some guidelines when it comes to the sources of funding, things that we haven't really followed in this country. But then, when we extend that to the CSOs and their sources of funding, that too is a highly thorny issue. It's difficult to track these CSOs and their sources of funding to know whether they are even political in the first place or not. And I'll cite this instance. In 2019, we had, former President Mahama complaining, badly about some CSOs on the back of the Ayawaso West Wogon incident, the by-election, stating that some of them were being leaning towards a certain end, that they had made their positions lax as far as the Akufo-Addo administration was concerned, and that they were unfairly lambasting him for comments that he had made on the back of those happenings. So when you put all of these together, you realize that for some of these CSOs, it is simply an avenue for making money. What do we need to do, whether constitutionally or otherwise, to ensure that we can have some sort of streamlining of the CSOs to ensure that they are serving our interest as a people, not any political interest? Or even if they are serving political interest, it is not so tied to the politics that we do not benefit as ordinary citizens.
Yeah, I agree with you, Benjamin, that the issue of funding is a very big thing, because civil society organizations cannot
Hello, Dr. Saidu. Okay.
Proper funding. Yes, please. Personally, they tend to group around issues that give them source of funding. So maybe if there was so much funding for democratization, you tend to see civil society organizations that emerge and revolve around the funding, the democratic funding process. If it is about water and sanitation, you tend to see them grouping around this kind of funding, existing funding schemes. So over the years, they have tried to mobilize and become stronger. So they have formed partnerships, they have formed coalitions, and they have been able to do networking to be able to move around it. So, but most of these issues that they fight for in the country are usually financed by foreign governments and foreign agencies. So there's even a tendency that some of the civil societies, if they are not doing the bidding of government and they are not doing the bidding of the citizenry, they are rather going to be doing the bidding of the foreign government or the foreign agency that fund them. So civil society need to move beyond the element of donor-driven funding to be able to generate resources on their own, to be able to champion the cause of what? The issues that they are fighting for, but collectively the cause of the Ghanaian populace.
Okay.
I don't think the state should provide funding for civil society unless civil society organizations that have been created by government to deal with a specific policy issue within the context of the country or outside of the country. So gongos are allowed, state fund gongos openly. So when you look at Freedom House, for example, the Freedom House is funded, I think more than 60% of the funding for Freedom House come from the US government.
Right.
And they project democracy and they start democracy. And people believe in doing this. They have become what? the official foreign wing of the United States government in championing liberal democracy. So in those instances, government funding can be directed to this organization when they are championing the policy interests of government within or without the country. But the way they stand now, it will be difficult to add them to the public wage bill.
Point well made. Let's cross over. Let's get over the phone lines now. We have Kofi Mensah, who is joining the conversation right before we continue with our guests. Kofi Mensah, thank you for joining the conversation.
Hello.
Good evening. Thank you for calling in. What are your thoughts? What is your thinking? Did the president step his bounds?
So I've listened to the panelists severally.
Right.
I've listened to Dr. Ali Seidu and the theory that is propounding. I agree, but we need to bring the conversation down. We're finding out today, if you walk out on the streets today, you talk to the average Ghanaian, what is their perspective or their perception of the civil society organization? Okay, from where I see it as akin to a referee in a match. Okay, so we're saying that the whole place is politicized. We can say NDC is going to say this, NPP is going to say this. But who is the one who's bringing the middle ground? The middle ground is supposed to be the CSO. So if the CSOs lose their credibility in terms of letting us know what the middle ground is or what the real issues are, then we've lost it. Do you understand my point?
Right.
So me, I have two questions. I want to understand first of all, on whose instance was the meeting held? Was it on the instance of the CSOs or the instance of the president? So if you went to speak to the president, he can talk to you the way he spoke. Because at the end of the day, he's thinking that you are an enemy. He's not looking at you like a stakeholder in the governance of the society, where he's saying that, okay, I need to get feedback from these people to get things done. That's why he spoke the way he spoke. So he's seeing you as an enemy. Because he's seeing that you are there to bash his government, not to speak well of his government, which is not supposed to be the case. It means that we have credibility issues with our CSOs, and that we need to correct. For me, humbly, that's my position. And I think the CSOs should take a cue from this and try to work themselves out. Because going forward, I cannot allow myself as a citizen to have CSOs who are either pandering to government or against government. I just need them to be focused, neutral, let us see what's going on. That's all.
Okay, so for you, Kofi, you feel the CSOs should fix themselves too, right?
Say again?
So you feel the CSOs, just to play on words, should be fixing themselves too?
They should fix themselves because at the end of the day, I don't see at whose instance the meeting was. I mean, I don't see how you go and sit down with a man who claims that you have something against him and then you go and talk to him. You don't expect that. So they got the shots, they went, they got what they want. They got. So that's it.
Okay, right before...
The back and then put the pressure. Let's get governance done. It's simple as that. I don't see why they should necessarily try to attract the attention of government or try to deal with government. It doesn't work that way. From where I sit.
Right before you take leave of us, very briefly, do you feel at least in the past, some of the things we've seen our CSOs do as far as the Auditor General is concerned, when the imposed leave, so to speak, was placed on him, amongst myriad matters we've seen them commenting on, Sputnik V and all of that, do you feel they have at least served the national interest in the course of these last few years, 5 years?
Honestly, if you ask me, up until I heard of the meeting they went with the president, I held them in high esteem. I held them say that they were looking out for the average Ghanaian. But then I'm trying to understand now. So what is it? I think for me it's a PR for par. I don't see how they should have done that. Stay in your corner, do what you have to do. There's no point. What are we pandering to? What are we trying to prove?
Thank you, Kofi Mensah, for joining the conversation. But in the end, these CSOs would have to, even as they put their ideas out there, it is government that will implement a lot of what they talk about. So they might need to engage government in some ways. Even when Fix the Country was on the streets, some lambasted them for not presenting a petition, but they were addressing some of the core issues, and it was targeted at government. Anyway, you can still share your thoughts with us. We'll also be taking your WhatsApp messages, 055 11 11 997. 055 11 11 997. George, let's come to you now on this very important matter. As a citizen, do you see and feel the relevance of CSOs in the governance space? In the last few years, for example, let's focus on this administration. What is your take on the activities of CSOs?
No, I definitely see the relevance of CSOs in governance. within this last administration and even the administration prior to that. They have, in one way or the other, the ones that have been able to stay true to their cause and true to what they are established for, they have been able to keep the government's feet, made them more accountable to the average Ghanaian. Most of the issues that they go fighting for the ordinary citizen are issues that the ordinary citizen's voice cannot be heard. But once they get involved in it, the issue is listened to by the government and it's taken care of one way or the other. My only problem with this whole thing is when you started talking about the funding, you said there are rules that governs it, but we cannot implement them. Benjamin,
I was speaking about political parties. Political parties. I segued from political parties to the CSOs. And I said that in terms of our constitutional arrangement, we have guidelines when it comes to political parties. But when it comes to CSOs who could be funded by political parties, then it becomes a bit murky. That's what I indicated.
No, so if that is the case, then we need to start putting in guidelines to help make this murkiness go away. Because until we are able to do that, like the Professor Edu said, political parties are going to spin off some of these CSOs to come and dilute the message of that whole space. Because at the end of the day, they are trying to do that to serve their purposes. And they are trying to do that to discredit the ones that are doing the right thing. So let's get some structures in place. Let's get some baselines in there so that we can hold the CSOs to that particular baselines that we have put in place and make their voice more powerful. Because like Kofi said, if the citizenry feel that they have been compromised, then their voice becomes non-existent. But if we are able to put guidelines that make sure that they are definitely doing what they are supposed to do and their voice is not tainted by anything, then there would be a very strong arm that can help shape our democracy and shape the governance in the country.
Abna, if you are to look at these civil society organizations and pick out some of the matters they talk about, I'd like to single one of them and get your take, especially on the back of corruption-related activity and the accusations they leveled against Mr. President and his NPP administration. Now, you would see, for example, that they state in their interaction with the presidents that between 2012 and 2020, we've never crossed the number 50 when it comes to the corruption perception index of Transparency International. And they are hammering on this. In fact, in 2020, the recent release, the score of Ghana was 43. So that is factual. It goes back to what Dr. Ali Duseidu said. That is factual. It is backed by evidence. When the CSOs come through with such matters, how do you feel we ought to take them as an administration? The president had some choice words for them on the back of that as well.
All right. I think that firstly, their activities are ones that should be given a lot of recognition and a lot of significance, in the sense that they are more likely going to push out information that is more representative of the facts. Because if you leave this particular job, for example, representing how corrupt or not corrupt a government is to political parties or political persons, they are more likely going to, tilt the scale and try to justify it to make their own parties look better, or in terms of their political recognition, seem more safer. I think that it's therefore important that these individuals continually push these information and make sure that they are getting the level of coverage in terms of it's reaching individuals. I think that the ultimate goal of these CSO should be one that would sensitize Ghanaians to be more cautious in terms of how they make political decisions, in terms of how much they are putting pressure on their government to act. I think that in that state, it's always better. The only criticism, though, that I'd have in terms of these particular organizations is that most of their works, especially in the past few years, have been very reactive as opposed to being proactive, in the sense that they wait for so much damage to be caused or they wait for when there's so much media like media coverage or media sensationalism.
Right.
That's when you realize that they are out there pushing for people's
Jumping
rights.
on
I think
board.
that's very problematic, because if you realize that we are heading towards a very slippery slope in terms of our corruption index, you don't wait for it to get to the very wrong end, and that's when you start making noise about it. I think that they have to continuously put themselves out there in terms of representing people politically and making sure that even before the ultimate harm is caused, government is putting much more energy into the policies they are making. Government is putting much more energies in terms of their conduct and making sure that they are in line with what individuals in the countries voted them to do, and they respect the political views of everyone in the society.
Right. So I'm just going to do this. Not the last round, penultimate round. Then we'll take some messages and come back to you to wrap up. But Afiba, in which practical ways do you see CSOs in Ghana contributing to our democratic, consolidation? Very briefly on this point.
So I think
well, it appears we have a bit of a...
They are currently doing some of the things that say are practical ways that now. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
Thank you. So I was saying before that some of the opinions I have on how practical and relevant CSOs could be in today's political landscape are things that, in my opinion, they are already doing in small ways. And that could be, say, presenting alternatives to governmental policies. And that's where Abene's suggestion on them being proactive instead of being reactive all the time becomes important. So we could have them do stuff like that. But the problem is, and this is exactly what I wanted to say when we were talking about what CSOs must do and what stance they must take. So presenting alternatives are one role CSOs play and must play, but also taking stance. Say, for instance, the easiest example I could think of is the LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. So, for instance, if a government has a particular policy either for or against these guys, and CSOs presenting the stand that seems to be antagonizing the role of CSO, if we place the neutrality tag on them, that they should remain neutral. We cannot have that happening. So we can, like I said, we can have them presenting very brilliant alternatives, proactive alternative, of course, and also when it becomes necessary, they're taking a stance in support against the general good.
All right, Afiba, thank you very much. For the rest of you, I'm going to have to limit this. We're on a time leash. So let's do this in 20 seconds each for the rest of you. Dr. Seidu, George, Abena as well. We're going to do this very briefly. How do you see CSOs contributing to democratic consolidation in Ghana? Dr. Seidu, 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think they've done a lot in the past to do making our elections a more issue-based one, providing platform for political parties to debate their manifestos and keeping a serious check on the dictatorial tendencies of government, contributing to policy discussions and policy making. So I think over the years, they've done great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
They are supposed to be civil.
Okay. They are supposed to be. What was the last point you made?
No. I don't know when I've exhausted my time, so that's why I've kept quiet.
Okay. But I just wanted you to reiterate. You say they are supposed to be what? Civil?
So I said the civil societies are supposed to be civil.
Okay.
And represent strong societies. But how strong are our societies? And how civil are they?
Okay. Point well
made.
So
we can also have uncivil civil societies. And we have to be very cautious of the work they do.
George, 20 seconds for you.
Yes, sir. Now, the space that civil society occupy within any democracy is a very, very important one. They have made a lot of progress since they started going. All that I want to say is they should continue to be subject-based. They should stick to what matters that they are established for remain impartial, and not get swayed by any government in power. They are doing a great job so far.
Okay. I'll wrap up with you, Abna.
All right, so I think that firstly, they should attempt to increase their reach in terms of the work they do. They should be more sensitive and actively push minority representation, and they should actively push for legislative reforms in sectors where there are issues.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when we return, we're taking some WhatsApp messages in just about a minute. When we come back, the final bit I'll do with you is to find out what your score would be of CSOs on a scale of 1 to 10. Let's say in the Fourth Republic, or let's even say within the last administration. What would be your score? And that would just be something you give us the number from 1 to 10. But joining me now is our own man who will be telling us about what the people have been sharing on WhatsApp. What have they been saying?
Right, so citizen Sika Togo from East Legon says, it is preposterous and a bit strange for the president to think that all anti-corruption civil society organizations must stay silent or engage pre-singing. It is still and counterproductive to put that across. This one says, this is a political issue, take it or leave it. All these people are fighting for one political party or the other. So these are some of the comments coming in from WhatsApp. This particular one says, the CSOs are too partisan on their criticisms on this particular government. The president's response to them is in the right direction. Let me take this last one from Charles, sending this from Adenta. It says the challenge with some of these CSOs is that some of their members become political appointees and turn around to criticize government.
Well, some interesting views, you would say, Kweku Asante. But thank you very much for sharing those. And to wrap the conversation, I'll come back to each of you. I'll start with you again, Dr. Seidu, and it's just going to be the final bit. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate our CSOs?
I'll give them 7.
And the reason is?
I'll give them 7 out of 10.
Okay. And the brief reason is?
Yeah, they have been able to influence policy, set policy agenda, and put government on these toes.
All
regardless of how we perceive them, they're occupying the civil space very well.
Thank you. George?
I'll give them 5.
Okay.
And that's purely because they've held government accountable.
All right. For you, Abna?
It's a 7 for me, mainly because they've been able to achieve a lot of tangible benefits in terms of legislative reforms.
Okay, and finally, Afiba.
Yeah, I'll give them a 6 to 7 because they've reinforced the opinions and stance of the general good of people.
Okay, so a 6 to 7, I would strike the average and say 6.5. But thank you very much, Dr. Alidu Seidu, political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, George Poku, accountant and radio show host in Georgia, USA, Abna Acha, a final year law student at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. We were not able to connect with Benjamin Dowona. He was, on the slot to actually join us. And then Afiba Harrison, a youth activist and former student activist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining the conversation. Well, so that is how we wrap up on Ghana Connect for another night. But right before we go, Pepsodent Cavity Fighter is here, and this is what you must know. Just because something doesn't taste sweet doesn't mean it has no sugar. That's a common misconception. There are hidden sugars in food. These sugars cause cavities and tooth decay and are even more active at night when we do not brush before bedtime. Now, your trusted and powerful Pepsodent Cavity Fighter toothpaste is fortified with pro-fluoride complex and active microcalcium to give you double action and protection from cavities caused by food and drinks during the daytime and works twice as hard, repairing tiny invisible holes even hours after brushing at night. Pepsodent Cavity Fighter is available in all leading shops across the country and is sold for 6 Ghana cedis only. 6 Ghana cedis per. Remember, for double action and protection against cavities, brush twice daily in the morning and at night before bedtime. Pepsodent, every smile matters. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for staying tuned for Ghana Connect. Stay tuned for the rest of our programming.